the Scientific American, you wrote a piece about carbon removal technologies. So
right.
Maybe you could explain us to which degree fossil fuel industries also rely and promote nowadays carbon removal technologies such as BECCS or direct air capture.
Some of the adaptation argument is tied to techno-fideism, the idea that we don't have to worry because technology will solve our problem. And we see lots of people in Silicon Valley, for example, pushing this argument. Just let the market do its thing. I mean, it's tied to the anti-regulation argument. Roll back regulations, empower entrepreneurs, we'll get the technology we need. The problem with that argument is that we've had 50 years for the market to give us what we need, and it hasn't happened, and particularly not at the scale we need. So I think the evidence is pretty clear that the market, or I should say markets, because the market is just kind of an idealization, markets haven't responded to the degree that we need them to, and that's where you need government incentives, government regulations, investment in green technology, these kinds of things. But one of the technologies that is sometimes promoted is carbon capture and storage, or the idea that we can capture carbon either at the wellhead, the tailpipe, or directly from the atmosphere, put in the ground and clean it up, and that'll make everything great. There are lots of problems with that argument, and one of them is that it's primarily the fossil fuel industry pushing it. And they're pushing it because they want us to believe that it's okay to keep using fossil fuels because, don't worry, we'll just capture the carbon and store it. The problem is, A, to the extent that it exists as a technology, it's crazy expensive, so who's going to pay for that? B, it won't work if we keep putting more pollution into the atmosphere. I mean, people like to use the analogy of a bathtub. Imagine your bathtub's overflowing, so you say, oh, don't worry, I'll drill a hole in the bathtub and we'll take some of the water out, and so it'll all be fine. Well, a smarter thing would simply be to turn off the tap. So there's no way carbon capture can really work for us unless we do something about the source of the increasing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. But also, third, and again, this is, I think, in a way to tell, there are a number of carbon capture and storage projects around the globe and in the United States. Here in the United States, all but one or two of them are actually enhanced oil recovery projects. So what does that mean? When you drill an oil field, because oil is very sticky, a lot of the oil stays in the ground. So you can drill a field and the pressure will cause the oil to come up to the surface where you can then capture it and sell it. But a lot of oil stays behind. In many oil fields, it could be as much as half of the oil or even more stays in the rocks. And this has been known for a long time. This is not any kind of new revelation. So companies developed strategies that they used to call secondary and tertiary recovery. Now they call it enhanced oil recovery, because I guess enhanced is a nice word. And what that really means is flushing the field with water, with detergent, or with carbon dioxide to try to flush out that remaining oil so you get more oil that you can then sell and burn. So how do they do this? Well, one of the materials that's used for enhanced oil recovery is carbon dioxide. Yeah. And so there are projects all around the globe where CO2 is pumped into oil fields to get more oil out. The fossil fuel industry is pretending that these are climate solutions. And there's lots of places where they basically represent enhanced oil recovery projects as if they were carbon storage projects. And they're not. A, because there's actually, in many cases, no guarantee the CO2 is actually staying in the subsurface, and B, because even if it did stay in the subsurface, you're using it to get out more fossil fuels, which then you burn and produces more greenhouse gases. So it's not a climate solution, but it's being represented as a climate solution, and frankly, a lot of people have fallen for it, because in the Inflation Reduction Act, which was passed under the Biden administration, which was the first substantive climate policy ever in the history of the United States, a big part of that project were tax credits for CCS projects. So we're basically subsidizing the oil industry in a way that certainly doesn't solve the problem and could actually, in the worst case scenario, make the problem worse.